It was a late afternoon when the call came in. The person on the other side said, "Our teens are at summer camp, and they are very concerned. They just heard about Roe v. Wade overturning, and all the teens want to call their parents. They are scared." My heart sank. This past June 24, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, a landmark piece of legislation that made access to an abortion a federal right in the United States. This decision dismantled 50 years of legal and safe protection for individual states to now curtail or completely ban abortion rights, and for a woman to choose and decide what to do with her body. This historic change was a gut punch to many of us, including many of our kids, who began to ask themselves, what does this mean for our future? I'd like to preface what I'm about to say with a sort of disclaimer. I'm sharing these words with you out of good presumption. I'm not here to advocate slogans or participate in slander or share that one side is careless or doesn't think about women. I'm about to offer words about an issue that I recognize is deeply divisive and discuss the Jewish perspective regarding an issue that is affecting our country. And I also want to raise awareness on how it's affecting members of our community, particularly our children. In June, the Supreme Court turned the issue relating to a woman's right to choose and terminate a pregnancy back to the states. The federal government no longer makes decisions on this issue, and each state is to decide for itself how they want to rule on this issue. This is a problem because individual people can dictate the outcome for others without taking minorities into consideration. When each state mandates rulings around abortion, they will not necessarily take the Jewish perspective, to name just one minority voice, into consideration, especially when there are so few Jews in that particular state. This is not a question of supporting a particular candidate or endorsing a singular political party. As Jews, we do not stand behind one person or one body of government. We stand up for policies that may or may not uphold a certain morality. When our tradition goes against a particular policy, we raise our voices, not just for the downtrodden, but we raise our voices for what is right. Policies determine communal standards and behaviors, and because free societies navigate policies politically, we are obligated to be part of the political process, not as partisans, but as messengers of Jewish truth. So what does our tradition say about abortion? Well, like many important issues in our Torah, our tradition teaches that it's a complicated issue, and there is no one-size-fits-all answer. Even our most traditional brothers and sisters say that terminating a pregnancy is not murder, nor does it go against Jewish law, depending on the circumstances. Judaism takes into consideration the life and well-being of a woman first and foremost, before the life of the fetus, because it is a potential being, not a living one. The mother is living. There's a passage in Exodus that describes a pregnant woman getting injured because someone physically runs into her. The passage says that if the pregnancy becomes terminated as a result, a fine is paid to the woman. It's a somewhat calculated and perhaps emotionless outcome, but it helps us understand that if the woman died as a result of that person colliding into her, they would be punished. In this illustration, we see the difference between an already existing life versus a potential life. The woman's life in Jewish tradition always takes precedent over the fetus until it's born, even if it's in the 9th month. If the mother is in danger, you save the life of the mother. On this, our tradition is clear. Furthermore, as Reform Jews, we put our ideology at the forefront of our practice, And according to the organizations that we belong to, the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and the Union for Reform Judaism, we support a woman's right to choose. The right of a living being takes precedence over a potential being. This is the position of the movement, particularly in a democratic country. So where do things get a little bit blurry? We can terminate a pregnancy if a woman is in anguish or there's a threat to the mother. And that is where the range of anguish can become complex. How does one objectively measure anguish, be it physical, mental, or emotional? And Judaism does not consider the termination of a pregnancy as a casual means of birth control. In my experience, I have never met someone who casually decides to terminate a pregnancy. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I find that these cases are rare. Therefore, when we turn the decision-making back to the states, you get people with a range of opinions that are not consistent nationwide, and perhaps even worse, do not take the Jewish perspective into consideration. This means that if you live in a state that does not allow a woman to decide whether she wants to terminate a pregnancy, this state is in direct violation with Jewish law. When it comes to terminating a pregnancy, Judaism does not ask, when does life begin? That is the question asked by fundamentalists of other faiths. That is just one aspect of the question. Jews ask, why are we asking? Why are we asking the question in the first place, and for whom? Only this way can we actually begin to converse about the complexity of each individual case and make an informed and thoughtful decision. Each person is different, each circumstance is different, each pregnancy is different. And when we create civil law that not only contradicts our faith and ability to practice our religion freely, we also don't take extreme cases into consideration. What are those women who are raped, assaulted, or cases of incest, or human trafficking? When these laws remain intact and no exception is made for these women, they do not only have to deal with the pregnancy that transpires, but also live with the horrific trauma they lived through or survived. These laws are in violation of religious freedom and neglects to recognize the distress and suffering a woman endures in the aftermath. A woman should have the ability to make these decisions with an experienced physician of her choice and to speak to her spiritual guide, because she must live with this decision for the rest of her life. As a rabbi, this subject speaks very, very deeply to my heart. I have interacted with women who have had to make this decision for themselves, and it has never been an easy decision for any woman. There are so many emotions tied just in having the conversation around terminating a pregnancy. Several weeks ago, Cantor Sibo and I hosted a panel of guest speakers, doctors and lawyers who have recently become even more specialized in their fields due to the changes made by the Supreme Court. Dr. David Berkins, attorneys at law Ian Friedman and Jesse Hill. And if you have some time in the next few weeks, please watch it. It's in our archives on our website. This powerful and informational panel was an integral part of educating our community and thinking about how we move forward from here. But more than that, there was also an unexpected consequence from inviting these guests to come speak to us. Days before and after the panel discussion, women from our community, staff, congregants, young people, students, approached me privately and shared the impact that this panel had on their lives. They felt so much fear around this ruling, but knowing that their congregational leaders support them in these difficult decisions was, as one woman put it, invaluable. Moreover, women approached me and privately shared that they once had to terminate a pregnancy and have always felt shame in discussing it, but felt the need to get it off their chest and feel validation for the decisions they felt they had to make. Some spoke of having undergone an abortion recently, while others spoke about it happening decades ago. And each woman I spoke to disclosed that this was something they kept in their heart years later, knowing, however, that it was the right choice. They felt confident in the decision they made at that time, but was something they never forgot. My friends, I'm worried. We ought not be comfortable knowing that all Americans can afford financially or have the support to have an abortion when they need to. Many women face this decision alone and are sometimes cornered to bear a child when they are not ready. And unlike some of our laws, this is not an abstract issue. It's a real issue that affects real people in and out of our community. The overturning of this ruling has many consequences. We will see how this will play out in the years to come, and I truly pray that women won't be harmed as a result of this ruling. It's a reminder that we cannot take anything for granted. Everything we receive means we have to go out there and ensure its long-term sustainability. Take nothing for granted. Like many Americans, I'm worried that overturning this ruling could mean that other laws become reversed, like, for example, the marriage of our gay brothers and sisters, to name just one. There is so much more for us to do in this coming year to ensure that we can maintain the rights that we forget we have, like our religious freedom, for example. Because this is tied in this ruling, and that Jewish voice is not taken into consideration. We need to vote more. We need to go out and raise awareness regarding this serious issue and the consequences that may follow thereafter. We should not feel comfortable in this moment, or really in any moment. We must always be part of making change. Our Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, "You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." To be clear, I'm not giving this sermon to convince you wherever you are on this issue, but I do want to raise awareness about our community. Many of us are blessed to live comfortable lives and have the means to make this decision for ourselves or even assist members of our family. Not everyone in our community and in our country has the same luxury that we share. Not everyone shares the financial ability, support, and love that we have in this community in order to make such a heavy decision. And we know this is a complicated issue because Judaism doesn't have a one-size-fits-all answer to this question. And when we face contentious dilemmas, Judaism develops responsa, a discussion that helps us answer difficult questions such as these. Judaism cultivates responsa on almost every single issue imaginable to human nature and how we navigate this situation. Terminating a pregnancy appears in different ways throughout our tradition, and this matter has never just one outcome. This tells us there are many factors to consider, and the way the law in America stands now does not take all the elements into consideration. Politics are a pendulum that often swing back and forth, and we are never on one side of victory for very long and must readjust frequently. And in so doing, we can never take anything for granted: gay rights, minority rights, a woman's ability to make decisions about her own bodies. Issues like these and others are always changing, and we cannot afford to just sit by, not even for a moment. We must always be at the helm, waiting to continue to do our work. There is nothing automatic about liberty and freedom. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. Every step towards the goal of justice takes sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. Judaism forces us to ask ourselves, what have you done today? What have we done today? Every day is fit for action. We are obligated in Judaism to act on the moral challenges of our times. We are summoned to fairness and human dignity. This is our call. This is the Jewish call. There have been individuals and religious institutions that have collectively answered this call. In South Florida, congregations and individual clergy argued that under Jewish law, abortion is required if necessary to protect the health, mental or physical well-being of a pregnant woman. Thus, a lawsuit was filed against the banning of abortions after 15 weeks, saying that it violates the state constitution's right to privacy and freedom of religion. Part of their argument revolves around the fact that overturning Roe v. Wade is based on a Christian conservative viewpoint, not a universal ideology. The case argues that according to Jewish law, abortion is required if necessary to protect the mental and physical well-being of a woman. And whether they win or not, this is an uphill battle at this time, and that it serves as a reminder that abortion poses religious issues beyond those of the Christian right. To put it more plainly, overturning Roe v. Wade is an infringement on Jewish law, an infringement on our ability to practice our religion freely. Deeply rooted Jewish teachings indicate that abortion is permissible and even required if a mother's life is in danger. This is said by Jewish leaders from across the denominational spectrum. In Jewish thought, it is so widely accepted that as long as a fetus is in the womb, it has potential, but not full personhood. I know that the last few years have been so politically divisive, and we all have enormous pressures. Accompanied by 2 very painful years that were brought on by COVID, we are still creating our new normal. And in the midst of it all, we continue to fight for justice and repairing of our world. We fight for principle and moral sentiment to nurture the running waters of life. We contemplate our most sacred values that help guide us, deepening our own understanding of what we have and take none of it for granted. As Jews, we are not daunted by struggle, but strengthened by it. We do not seek a challenge-free world, but challenge the emptiness of life. We do not escape trouble, but struggle with escapism. The Talmud has a fascinating debate about leadership. As many of you know, the tractates in the Talmud are often structured in form of conversation or discussion. This particular tractate holds that the leader of each generation dictates the actions of the people, while the opposing view holds that it is the generation of individuals that shape and mold the leaders. One is a top-down and the other is down-up model. This begs the question, what role does a leader play in society, and the reverse? What role does the society play in choosing or electing a leader? The Talmud never resolves this issue and leaves it as a wise dilemma for us to ponder. But we can probably surmise from the argument that both are vital and lay the groundwork for our service. This message also holds the notion that we all share in the responsibility and the burden of shaping the world we want for ourselves and the world we want to leave for the generations after us. On Rosh Hashana, we read the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Our forefather Abraham, is tested by God when he is asked to sacrifice his son, his favorite son. This is such a heart-wrenching story and is both densely narrated and simultaneously we are left with so many questions. So many midrashim have been created for this passage. Midrashim are stories that help us answer unresolved questions in the Torah because we are left somewhat perplexed at the end. Sarah and Abraham were unable to have children, and at the age of 90, Sarah finally got pregnant, only to test Abraham later in life to see if Abraham was, in fact, faithful to God and would offer this son to God, the son he had been waiting for so long. And each year we read the Akedah, and it leaves us intentionally uncomfortable. In return to reading this narrative, we question, why would God ask Abraham to do this? What did Sarah have to say about this after the fact? And how come we never hear of Abraham and Isaac ever speaking again after that moment? Those are just a few of the questions that begin to scratch the surface. The Akedah helps us understand the complexity of human beings. We are not all the same, nor are our worldviews. We are not a one-size-fits-all species. Abraham was so steadfast in his faith, he was ready to sacrifice his son to God, the son he adored. The human condition has so many variables, and it is our job to do our best to find compromises that befit the moral structure of our society. Our tradition values human life and places the sanctity of life first and foremost. As Jews, we are permitted to fracture almost any rule in order to save a human life. This is called kavod habriut, respect or revering the life or livelihood of human beings, respect for human dignity. And as Reform Jews, we as a movement hold that abortion is both a medical and spiritual decision. This often heavy decision of terminating a pregnancy is one that in all circumstances should ultimately be made by the individual within whose body the fetus is growing. Reform Judaism believes the pregnant individual should maintain autonomy over their body. There's a widespread agreement between rabbis and scholars that a complete prohibition on abortion is inconsistent with Jewish law and tradition, and therefore the overturning of Roe v. Wade does not take into consideration Judaism, which is an infringement on our freedom to practice Judaism. In this case, women cannot consult their religious leader if the law bans abortion. Judaism is unequivocally pro-life in that it values life in all its forms, both actualized and potential. Deciding if to terminate a pregnancy is a case-by-case decision that a woman must make with the help of her physician and should take into consideration her emotions and spirituality. I was in Israel, in Ashdod, in my parents' home, when I heard the news about the Supreme Court decision. I received painful phone calls from women and men of all ages, people who were afraid. I did my best to counsel them in the moment and remind them of the work we have to do. And the word reached Israeli news within minutes. And within days of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, Israel responded by further easing the already accessible abortion laws in Israel. The new policy that was led by Israel's health minister was approved by an overwhelming majority in the parliamentary committee, granting women the ability to terminate pregnancies in the privacy of their own homes without having to go through hurdles or challenges. As I said, this issue speaks to me very deeply. Not just in fear for our country and our world, but our very own community. I'm afraid women will get hurt or even die trying to terminate a pregnancy through illegal means, which we have seen before. The pain, harm, and fear we will see in the years to come as a result of this ruling can be detrimental for our society, especially for those of lesser means. This is not a partisan issue. It is one that grapples with morality and faith-based practice. Our country permits freedom of religious practice, and we have the right to exercise Jewish law in making choices about the way we live our lives. As we bring in 5,783 on this Rosh Hashana, I wish us all health of mind, body, and soul, joy through laughter, meaningful gathering with the people we love, and the ability to use our ancient faith as we shepherd it into the future together. Chag Sameach and Shana Tova.